The tent was cut open from the inside, not the entrance. The wall, slashed with a knife from within by people desperate to get out. 9 experienced hikers ran from that tent into a Siberian night, into -30 degrees, into a blizzard, in the dark, most of them wearing socks, no coats, no boots. Every one of them died, and when the search party finally found the bodies, the injuries didn't make sense. One had no eyes, one was missing her tongue, 3 had crushed ribs and fractured skulls, the kind of damage you would see in a high-speed car crash, but there was not a single external wound, no bruises, nothing had touched them. For 60 years, the answer was blamed on the impossible. Yetis, UFOs, secret Soviet weapons, a KGB assassination. In 2021, 2 scientists finally cracked it, and the truth turned out to be something far stranger, because the hikers had killed themselves hours earlier without knowing it. January 1959, the Soviet Union. 10 students and graduates from the Ural Polytechnic Institute set out on a skiing expedition through the northern Ural Mountains. Their leader was a 23-year-old engineering student named Igor Dyatlov. These were not amateurs. Every member of the group was an experienced ski hiker. They were attempting one of the hardest certifications in Soviet mountaineering, a route rated Category 3, the most difficult level that existed. Reaching it would make them among the most qualified winter hikers in the country. One member turned back early. Yuri Yudin fell ill and left the group before they reached the mountains. He shook his friends' hands, watched them ski north into the white, and went home. He would be the only one to survive. The remaining 9 pushed on toward a mountain the local Mansi people called Koletsyakhl. In their language, the name means dead mountain. We know exactly what the group did in their final hours because they documented it themselves. They kept diaries, they took photographs. The film was later developed from cameras found at the scene, and the last images show 9 people, smiling, setting up their tent on the evening of February 1st. But here is the first strange decision. They pitched their tent on an exposed, open slope, halfway up Dead Mountain, in the wind. This makes no sense for experienced hikers. Just a kilometer downhill was the tree line. Shelter, firewood, protection from the storm. Any one of them knew that. Yet they chose to camp on the open face of the mountain, cutting into the snow to level a platform for the tent. Investigators would argue about that decision for decades. Why stop there? Why expose themselves? The answer, it turns out, was the very thing that killed them. But no one would understand that for 60 years. That night, something drove all 9 of them out of that tent, and they never came back. When the group failed to send a telegram by their expected return date, no one panicked at first. Delays were common. But when a week passed with no word, the families demanded action. A search party set out on February 20th. 6 days later, they found the tent. It was half buried in snow, and it was empty. The structure was still standing, but one side had been cut open, sliced from the inside with a knife. Everything the hikers needed to survive was still inside. Their boots, their coats, their food, all of it, neatly left behind, as if they had abandoned the tent in a single, sudden moment of terror. Then they followed the footprints. 8 or 9 sets of tracks led down the slope, toward the tree line, and the prints told an impossible story. The people who made them were barefoot or in socks. Some had only one shoe. They were not running in panic in every direction. They were walking in an orderly line away from the only shelter they had, into a killing cold. At the edge of the forest, under a large cedar tree, the searchers found the first 2 bodies. They were lying near the remains of a small fire, stripped down to their underwear, and on the tree above them, branches were broken as high as 5 meters up, as though someone had desperately tried to climb it, to see something, or to escape something. Over the following weeks and months, the searchers recovered all 9 bodies, and what the autopsies revealed only deepened the mystery. The first 5 were found relatively close to the tent. They had died of hypothermia, freezing to death. That at least made sense for people caught outside in a blizzard without clothing. But the last 4 were different. Their bodies were found much later, in May, buried under 4 meters of snow in a ravine deeper in the forest, and their injuries were catastrophic. One man had a fractured skull. 2 others had massive chest fractures, ribs broken with such force that doctors compared it to the impact of a car crash. One investigator was asked what kind of force could cause this. His answer, a force comparable to a car hitting a person at high speed. And yet, and this is the detail that launched 1,000 theories, none of them had corresponding external injuries. The skin was intact, There were no cuts, no impact wounds, nothing to show what had struck them. The bones were shattered, the surface was untouched. Then there was the worst detail of all. One of the women, Lyudmila Dubinina, was missing her eyes, her tongue, and part of her lips. To the public, this was proof of something monstrous. What could crush a chest without breaking skin? What could remove a tongue? This was no accident. This was something being hidden. And there was one more piece of evidence that poured fuel on the fire. When investigators tested the clothing of some of the victims, they found something that should not have been there: radiation. The Soviet investigation closed the case in 1959 with a phrase that explained nothing. The hikers had died, it said, due to a compelling natural force that they were unable to overcome. They did not say what that force was, and so, into that silence, the theories came. Some said it was a yeti, a creature of the mountains that crushed them. The broken tree branches, they argued, were signs of a struggle with something huge. Some said it was the Soviet military, secret weapons tests, parachute mines that detonate in the air, producing exactly the kind of internal injuries the hikers suffered: crushed organs, no external wounds. The radiation on the clothing, they said, was the proof. The state had killed them and covered it up. Some said UFOs. Glowing orbs had been reported in the sky over the Urals that winter by another group of hikers miles away. For 60 years, the Dyatlov Pass incident became one of the most famous unsolved mysteries on Earth. Books, films, endless debate, every strange detail: the cut tent, the missing tongue, the fractured ribs, the radiation, the barefoot march into the dark, seemed to rule out any ordinary explanation. The truth, when it finally came, would explain almost all of it, and it came not from a detective or a conspiracy theorist. It came from a physicist standing at a blackboard. In 2019, under pressure from the victims' families, Russian authorities reopened the case, and a journalist from a major newspaper made a phone call to a scientist in Switzerland named Johann Gaum. Gaum ran a laboratory that studied one thing: how avalanches work. At first, the avalanche explanation seemed impossible. It had been considered and dismissed for decades, for good reasons. The slope where the tent stood was too gentle. Avalanches need steeper ground. There was no obvious sign of a snowslide when the search party arrived, and avalanches don't usually crush ribs while leaving skin unmarked. But Gaum and his colleague Alexander Puzrin began running the numbers, and they realized everyone had been picturing the wrong kind of avalanche. Not a huge wall of snow thundering down a mountain, something smaller, rarer, deadlier in a very specific way: a slab avalanche. Here's what they concluded happened. When the hikers cut into the slope to level ground for their tent, they removed a supporting block of snow and left a wall of dense, heavy snow hanging above them. That night, powerful katabatic winds, violent downhill winds that can appear suddenly in these mountains, loaded even more snow onto that slab. And this is the detail that makes it so chilling. The avalanche did not happen right away. The cut and the wind set up a delayed failure. The hikers finished making camp. They lay down to sleep, and then hours after they had unknowingly sealed their own fate, the slab let go. A block of hardened snow slid down and struck the sleeping hikers where they lay. In their computer models and in impact experiments, Gaum and Puzrin showed that a heavy slab hitting a body braced against the hard floor of the tent could break ribs and fracture skulls, while the surrounding snow spread the force just enough to leave no surface wounds. That was the impossible injury. A car crash impact with no external mark. Explained. The team survived the initial hit. In the dark, injured, half-buried, they did what mountaineers are trained to do. They cut their way out of the tent and retreated to the tree line to regroup, carrying and dragging their most badly hurt friends. But in -30 degrees, without their boots and coats, there was no way back. The cold took the first of them near the fire. The others, seeking shelter, moved into the ravine, where a second snow collapse may have caused the final, catastrophic injuries to the last four. So what about the details that fed 60 years of legend? The missing eyes and tongue, the most horrifying clue of all, have a grim natural explanation. Dubinina's body lay in a stream in the ravine for months before it was found. The soft tissues of the face are the first to be lost to water and natural decomposition. It was not removed by a monster, it was taken by time. The radiation on the clothing? 2 of the hikers had worked with radioactive materials in their studies. Trace contamination, unrelated to their deaths. The orderly march from the tent. Not panic, but a disciplined retreat by trained survivors doing exactly the right thing in an impossible situation. In 2021, Gami and Puzrin published their findings in a scientific journal. Later expeditions to the pass confirmed that the slopes there really are capable of producing avalanches, something skeptics had denied for years. But here is where honesty matters. The scientists themselves do not claim they solved everything. No one survived. There was no witness. Gam has said plainly that the full mystery may never be closed, that what they proved was not certainty, but plausibility. A physical, evidence-based account of how 9 skilled people could die on a gentle slope on a quiet night. For 60 years, we looked at Dead Mountain and saw monsters, governments, things from the sky. We wanted the answer to be as strange as the evidence felt, and in the end, it was stranger. There was no enemy, no creature, no conspiracy. Just 9 young people, a cut in the snow, a silent wind in the dark, and a mountain that waited a few hours to collapse on the people who had, without knowing it, already set the trap themselves. The tent was cut open from the inside. Now you know why. New investigations into the darkest true stories in science and history. Subscribe so the next one finds you.